Let's just start on the G2 topic. Let's just do it. By the way, if people are wondering why my voice is all super hoarse, sadly, unfortunately, 2 days ago, I did one of those watch parties in CSGO. And if no one saw the CSGO tournament, it was a best of 5 final that went all 5 maps, including one with overtime. And like the shortest map was like 16-9. So I was literally just talking for 7 hours, just filling time and fucking all bollocks. So whatever. That's taking its toll on me, hasn't it? Like, so this is the thing. On the G2 topic, right? I've actually been thinking about this, and there was a point I was making on some of the insight that I thought actually explains more about this squad. Because here's the problem, Dom. Being as we had all those weeks at the beginning of this split where we were obviously praising them and talking about how they look like they're far and away the best team, and even all the players, quite frankly, were doing well. Like, actually, they came out of MSI looking great. People were having score lines where, like, every guy looks like he's carried on the fucking scoreboard. You just dominate the opponent. Jankos and Caps were smurfing all the games, basically, minus actually the one loss to BDS. Basically, that was like the random out of nowhere loss, you know. And even that was almost like, if people don't know the way like campaigns go, that actually is how you want your losses to come if you're the best team. You want to like destroy all your real competition, but then have like a random loss to like the worst team. Like, that doesn't really threaten you. It's more like it's the game of their lives. As you saw, it really was. That team hasn't done anything since either BDS. So like that game almost was relevant. But here's the problem, Dom. If we're going to like big up all the good parts of G2 on those weeks, this has to be a week where we have to talk about the flaws in the squad. And one of the angles I actually do see in this team that I think means it doesn't always work that well is if you think about their team, right? It's not that like Perks did it all. I hate that shit narrative because it just makes like it's too reductive on both sides, isn't it? Because then obviously when Perks goes to like Vitality, it's why people now flame him in Vitality because their logic goes like this, Dom. But you guys said he was like a god shot caller, blah, blah, blah. It's like, first of all, I never said he 1v9s games. So I don't know why you're pretending like I acted like he's forgiven or something. Like, he needs teammates. I've always said that. And then secondly, when I say he's a great shot caller, people have to sort of understand the shot call or follow it up or even, are you ready, guys? This might blow your mind. Set up players that could happen later. They don't just all appear out of nowhere. Like, you have to create them with the lane, the waves, how your fucking jungler works in. So, like, one thing I think when I look at the G2 squad is, I actually do think they suffer from not having the Perks aspect, mate, because what the point of all the people I've been talking to recently is, when G2's at their best and when G2's at their worst, they say the same thing. It's like, for them to be the best, Caps and Jankos have to be the best. If Caps and Jankos are the best in the league, then G2 can win. The problem with that is, mate, that essentially implies to me there isn't like a true shot calling setup in the team, because you've noticed now they're really bad. Like, they don't ever get like super strong early game leads. They're not like some power closeout team. They're just like a middling team in terms of how the eye test plays out. So I think if you look at their team, Cap's always, just as far as I can tell, leads by example. He just carries basically, and you just follow up on him carrying and making plays. Jankos, this is the problem. Yeah, he's a mega veteran. It's really hard to fucking shot call if you're behind as a jungler though. Like, you're just worried about your game at that point in time, mate. And then the bot lane are pure rookies. So I actually think in their team, like, it's going to be tough to have a perfect squad. They're going to have times like this where if players' form is off or they're just not the best at their position, you're not going to win games sometimes, I think.
Yeah, I think they're in a really rough spot because originally when they came into the league, they had a lot of like creative drafts. I mean, they did like the Diana, Yasuo, Yone comp, and they had their own take on what the meta was.
Sure.
And it feels like as they started losing, they've become more and more like narrow in the champions that they're willing to pick. But now it feels like they're in a situation where they don't actually understand the meta. They don't know what their meta read is. So before you thought, oh, well, you know, it doesn't really matter what the overall meta is. They're going to find their own thing. But now it looks like they've lost confidence. So they've been in this really weird situation where they wanted to play into Zeri, right? So because Zeri is really OP, they played it multiple times. And then teams were countering that with Twitch Yuumi. And then this week they said, all right, fuck it. Like, we'll let them draft Zeri and then we're going to play Twitch. But then they lose on both sides. So they're like, what the fuck? Like, is Zeri just OP? Are we just bad at like these two champions? Do we need to ban both now? Like, how are we going to answer this huge draft problem? Normally, the response is just ban Zeri on red side. That's what teams do around the world. But that is something that in these series, they just weren't able to actually, or in these games, they weren't really actually able to iron out. It feels like even in their BDS loss, they were winning so much that you could tell that they brushed it off and didn't really feel like a bad loss, especially with their draft. You know, it was one of those games where it's like, okay, Jankos doesn't play Vi. He played one Vi game, didn't look fucking good. All right, drop the Vi and just go back to playing what you were before. But now it feels like the losses have compounded and they've lost confidence in themselves. So, I mean, G2's always been a very emotional team. It felt like, you know, when they were good, they were really good. As soon as they lost confidence, they, you know, lose a bunch of games. So they're very streaky in terms of how their wins and losses come. I mean, they had that ridiculous, 24 game winning streak or something, followed by 9 games losing or something crazy. So this team, like, I just feel like they're not done by any means. They just have to figure out their identity again, get some wins, get some confidence, and then go from there, build upon that. And if they need to, maybe it's time for them to pull the misfits and just go back to what was working originally. Draft Orin. Just draft fucking Orin top every single game. Draft the solid lanes for Flockade, and then just let Caps and Yankees do their thing and just get some wins on the board, because it feels like they've forgot how to win.
Yeah, one thing as well I will say that you were making me think about there is, that's even something I think we can now look at and put on a timeline, dude, because here's the problem before. Most people, I get the vibe, treated G2 like this. There was G2, that was the regular split and that upper bracket match they had against Fnatic that they lost. And then they act like, right, that's like act 1 of G2. And then what they do is they act like, and they pick whatever the narrative is. It's either like because they went on stage in front of the crowd, or because they're in the lower bracket and they had the lower bracket run mentality and all that. Whatever the reason is, they then make the one that you're talking about, which begins the 24-0. So you go, you sweep all the lower bracket sets, you win LEC, you go to that pre-Rumble stage, where you play EG, you rock everyone, you win all those games, you win the first couple of games in the MSI Rumble stage. Basically, that's where, when you stop the 24-0, then people acted like, right, see, that was it. Like, they were on the crowd buff, Caps are sort of rediscovered his playing style, the teams like figured out the coaching staff were getting all the praise, they figured out the meta, blah, blah, blah. So here's what then everyone acts like. They act like, right, that's G2 after, though, and that's who we got now. Dude, I actually think, if anything, like you're saying there, there's two versions of G2. There's G2 when they're good, and then they look really fucking good, and they actually do look like the best team. But I tell you what, mate, if they're not actually at that peak form, man alive, they don't have like a B game, dude. They drop way down. They become like just a middling team, like I say, if they're not at their absolute peak. And we've now seen this a bunch of times now, because it bookends the really good period. Like, when they go back to being like this, the problem is, essentially, when this team becomes just its individuals, it actually isn't the best LEC team. It's still pretty good. Let's be real. It's not terrible. It's certainly not a bad squad. And I actually am still shocked by the standings. Like you say, like, they have a losing record, same record as Astralis. I'm almost certain that will turn around. But I have to say, at the moment, Dom, it looks to me like they themselves are going to get settled into one of those whack, like, spring vitality narratives of, like, if we can just make playoffs stuff, we just make playoffs, then we'll turn it all around. It's like, they might do. They might get the form of the players back. They might get the meta figured out. They might have a patch change. But I don't know, mate. This one feels like you can fucking flip a coin. Maybe they become really good again. Maybe they're just like the third best team now.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing for them is that no one actually looks good right now. So there's
That's
not
true.
a team that you're like worried about. That's because before, like in spring, for example, you had the Rogue 9-0 that looked significantly more dominant. Marlon was just shitting on everyone. Like, everyone was just getting rolled by this guy. He was popping off, and you actually had to be scared of that team. I mean, even Fnatic, I think, was something like 6-3 in the beginning of last split. So there was these teams that you felt like actually were strong in relation to the competition. But right now, there seems to be way more parity in the league, and not because like everyone got really good. It's like, damn, the league's really competitive. All the teams are just playing on like a 10 out of 10. It's more just that there's no team that seems exceptional right now. I mean, every team is flawed in some way. So you don't feel like G2 has to make up that much ground. It's more that they just need to get back in the mindset where it's like, okay, we're winners. We believe in each other again. Like, we know which fights are good. Now, when you watch them play, obviously, I don't know what the comms are. They haven't been released yet when we're recording this, where they do the comms, but it looks like in the fights, no one actually knows what they're doing. It's kind of like, oh, this looks good. Can we fight this? Yeah, like, we can fight. They're doing that little, like, they're like bumbling and just like rolling on top of each other, like rolling on top of themselves, like some teams do, where you know that they're not super poised as to like which fights are winning, which fights are losing, what conditions need to be met that they can just instantly capitalize on and just roll the fight. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's also partly because of the champions they play. Like, now they're playing a lot of GP, and GP is not the type of champion where you're like, oh, this looks good, like fucking hard engage. You're kind of just like fishing with barrel combos, and if you land a really nice one, then it's like, oh shit, I hit them, like now we're going in. But it's not like, you don't commit to the same degree as you do when you're playing in Orin, where it's like, all right, I call the fucking ulti, okay, I hit it like 3 people, they're all stunned, kill the fucking people that are stunned. It's way more direct in how that comp is played out. So, I mean, honestly, I think that if I was the coach, I would try to dumb things down for like a couple weeks, get that baseline where you just understand how to win games, and then go from there, build upon it again.
Not to harp on it too much, but your boy Broken Blade is definitely a fucking victim of the gangplank meta, mate. That's not looked good. I would just skip that if I were them, mate. I would skip that shit.
Yeah, it's really weird because he went from having like a terrible gangplank in TSM to like, and I've talked to him about this.
Exactly.
He had like a horrible gangplank. It was just a thing where if TSM locked in gangplank, the whole fan base would just groan. They'd be like, "Oh fuck, like it's coming again." That's part of the reason why originally he was getting all the calls to be benched. It's like he can't play the fucking meta champions. He can't play gangplank. He can't play Orin. Like he couldn't play the tanks. That was the whole idea. And then the weak side champions. Like he was good strong side. He was good with counterpick. He was bad weak side. And then when he played with Schalke, actually, his gangplank got pretty good, and his gangplank looked like a legitimate threat. And these recent games, I don't know, it just doesn't look like it's like he's been super confident on the pick. And I don't know if that's just like, you know, bad matches or just like a symptom of how the overall team has been playing. But it's just weird to see a lot of the lane phases that he's putting out, because normally that's one of his strengths as a player. He's generally one of the better laning top laners where he knows how to develop pretty big leads on his own. Now you're watching a lot of his lanes and he's getting the counter pick with Gangplank, playing it into somebody, but then he's like losing the lane, or he's like down 10 CS in the lane. And then when it gets to team fights, I mean, I think that's probably the hardest part about Gangplank. It probably been the weakest part of his Gangplank game historically. So just a weird spot for him. But yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely playing bad. But I mean, across the board, I would say the whole team is playing worse position by position. I don't think there's one player on G2 that I would say is like keeping their level. I mean, Jankos doesn't look like he's super strong. I mean, Flocket and Target Bus are starting to look like kind of how they looked in spring. And Caps, like,
still has some good games in the losses, but he's definitely not like a dominant player at the moment. Yeah,
I mean, the problem with Caps has always been this. Like, even if he's playing pretty well, like when he's playing really well, he's just the best player to you by far, you know? Yeah. So you're always comparing him to that standard. So obviously it's not fair. Like, he's probably still the best player on the team. Yeah, it's just his standard is so much higher than everyone else's.
No, to me, like, here's the analogy I would give for Caps. Basically, when their team isn't playing well, their team's like misfits. Like, Vethio, to win games for Misfits in the spring, had to pull fucking miracles out, mate. You had to be, like, better than everyone in the server. So if this spring he's just, like, a good player, like, or Misfits' best player, that doesn't always win you the game. That won't just beat the opponent. I think the same thing with Caps. Like, as you say, unfortunately, we have a ridiculous standard for Caps. Like, if people know from, like, CSGO, this is the way we treat people like Simple and Z-Woo and stuff. Like, their version of a bad game is a good game for a normal star player, but because their normal average is so transcendent, as mad as it sounds, you actually do expect them to carry every game, and if they don't, the team doesn't have the win conditions, because that's just the fucking luxury world they live in. One thing I'll say, which you touched on a little bit there, is though, like, again, there's not that much to talk about because it's been talked to death on these shows, but this is also why all the analysts who are fucking legit keep telling fans, look, slow your fucking roll on the flathead train, for God's sake. Like, again, we've now seen this guy play loads of LEC games, boys. Yes, he had a really good lower bracket run. I actually think he did his job amazingly well. In fact, as I sort of implied, if you want to go with the idea of being like the tertiary carry, the third lane that's supposed to carry, that would be like a fucking video exercise. And like, here's how you do it as a rookie. Like, don't take too many chances, play like this, play these things, whatever. He did a great job. He's just not a world-class player, boys. He's just like an all right player. In fact, the angle I thought's a way stronger narrative that a lot of people have pushed, which is a better angle, is he's obviously got a really unique personality and seems like a really great sort of glue character who inspires like a fun vibe. Because if you notice in G2, in theory, you want a fun vibe so you can roll with the punches and all the banter and all that shit. So I think in general, like, again, it's not a problem with him as a player, but now you see why analysts and experts, even when they win LEC, suggest like this is one of the weaker players on the team. Because if I had to fix this team tomorrow, if you told me like, we can transfer in and then name any of the top 4 ADCs, I'd do it tomorrow. They'd instantly be back in the fucking game competing for the championship. Whereas, like, as you see, if people like Caps, Jankos, their level drops down, this guy's not going to 1v9 the game. He's just an all right player. It's no hate. He's just an all right player, boys.
I mean, it's also just the champions that he's playing are way different. You know, like the way that you
also carry game carry from ADC, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that it's just he's not particularly good at a lot of the champions that are being played right now. So like the Twitch and Zeri, he's okay at both.
He's all right.
I wouldn't say he's stand out on either of them. And you know, one of the champions that he actually played really well, which I didn't really see coming, was the Xayah in the playoff bracket, and that's pretty much completely out of the meta. No one's really playing Xayah at all, and it's just not the same champion. Even when you do pick Xayah, you play it as a crit champion compared to like the build that was really popular during the lower bracket run, which was the lethality Muramana build, where you essentially play more like a caster. You're more like a poke caster type thing, and then your ult is on much lower cooldown, so you don't have to position as well as you do generally with the crit build. So Yeah, I mean, I just think that they're kind of in this weird spot, and the easiest way to band-aid this, just start banning Zeri, because then if you ban Zeri, you don't have to play the weird counters. You don't have to be like, oh, we're going to leave up Zeri and Yuumi, and then we're going to give them Zeri, but then we're going to take the Twitch Yuumi, and then they get the fucking counter pick to Yuumi, but it's fine because Twitch scales like and can't get abused hard by Zeri. You don't get into that whole little fucking mind game. You go down the rabbit hole, and then it's like, is this even good for us anymore? We're like sacrificing our entire fucking identity. Like Targamas can't even roam when he's playing that pick really. Yep. And, you know, is this really all the resources that we want to expend in draft just to get the situation that's like mediocre for us? It's not even a great situation at the end of the day. So I think that, you know, it's pretty easy to rebound from here, especially from pick and ban, because that was the issue that they've had in a lot of the previous games. I think that this week their pick and ban were fine. It was fine pick and bans, but it wasn't great for them. You know, it's like, okay, on paper it's fine, but on paper doesn't mean shit when you have like flawed teams. Like an on paper draft for a top LPL team can be fucking terrible if you give it to the wrong one. You know, it's really just about playing within your team strength and doing what you know how to do. And even though it was weird, even though most people thought that the big strength was going to be playing through top lane and just having like top lane carries, when this team was performing the best, what did they do? They picked Auron, they picked these tanks every game, and you have those in the meta. You have Auron still in the meta. You have Gnar still in the meta. You have Sejuani now in the meta. So Auron Sedge, like, go back to that and then really try to focus in on what your team did well before. I feel like that happens generally to a lot of teams. Like I remember as a player, I would have similar experiences where you do something well for a long period of time that you almost take it for granted and you start branching out on other things. But if you're not consistently going back and practicing what your roots are, you lose it. And then when you go back and you're like, oh my God, it's not a free win anymore. I've had this happen with pretty much every team I'm on. You overestimate your ability to just jump back to the things that you did well and automatically win. So you've got to just bring it out every now and then. Like even if you watch some of the top teams in the world, I've been watching a lot of RNG, and you would think like, okay, these guys just won MSI, they just won LPL, like they're gonna start branching out more. Fuck no, like almost every single series that you see them play, they'll have one game where Xiaohu will just play his fucking Lissandra mid, play Gwen top, they'll play the Viego with it, and they will just do their standard RNG comp, the one they used to win MSI, and they'll take a win, even if they're playing against bad teams, because they want to have that strong baseline.
I've got something on that topic, actually. Like, first of all, on that angle, like you're saying there, of like when you build up a skill, it's easy to take it for granted, basically. And in fact, even to make the mistake, this is a more general point, obviously, than just about esports. It's also very easy to think, because I've now got that skill, it's actually easy. Like, you know, now that I've got it, it's like riding a bike and I'll never forget it. But actually, that's the difference. The reason, by the way, everyone always cites the example of like, you don't need to like learn to ride a bike twice, is because that's one of those things that's like a very unique, actually. Like, that and swimming, you really can just not do it for like 10 years and somehow you will do it. Everything else, in my opinion, in life is the opposite. Like, basically, once you build something up, as you say, like, part of why it seems easy is because you essentially train yourself unconsciously to just be able to iterate that same like blueprint motion of like, do this first or do like a certain motion or an order or timing. And so if you stop doing it after a while, you almost have to consciously think about it again to make it happen. So what I would say is this is an example rather, from sports. That actually, I think, dude, a lot of people might not know this, right? You know, if you ever hear those stories about Steph Curry, I'll pick him, right, because he's obviously the new NBA champion again, and he's legendary for all the three-point shooting, right? I'm sure everyone knows there's loads of stories about him practicing, blah, 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 etc., right? But here's what people wouldn't get, Tom, because it's actually it's for modern people, I think this is a counterintuitive point, right? Steph Curry, the best three-point shooter ever, shoots the most three-point shots in practice easily. Like, he shoots a bazillion of them, right? Now, actually, if you don't know, a lot of people would think that the other way around. They would go, but he is the best and he has the best skill and the best accuracy. So actually, if anything, he could be the guy that could take more time off, couldn't he? He could sort of fuck around half the time and then he would still be better than like the guy who's an average three-point shooter. Yeah, he would, but the point is, his skill would degrade. Same thing if people don't know, back in the day, like 10, 15 years ago, Steve Nash used to be absurd at free throws, mate. I think it was like a 91% free throw shooter or something absurd, right? Same thing. He just practiced a billion free throws every day. And even when they're at the peak of their skill, they do the most practice in that sense. So actually, what you're getting to now, by the way, is why we have this discussion in all the league shows during the regular split that goes like this, because we're going to be able to apply this some teams in a minute, I think, actually, by the way. the conversation always goes, are you trying to just get the next W, which means basically you've got like a 4-day practice window where at the end of the 4th day you need to get a result somehow? Or are you practicing to just be a better, like, holistic League of Legends team, which that might mean you practice things that don't pay off for weeks, potentially months and months, right? So the premise goes, and it's always the dilemma that fans miss. You can't, it's not like a video game where it's like, right, I completed level 10, so I keep all like my side lane and that. Like, if you don't ever side lane again and you were a side lane team, you'll be shit at it when you try it in 3 weeks, or in a game when you haven't done it for a whole week. Like, you will drop off. It's why the battle always is, how much can I conserve and how much can I like spend on experimenting? Which is why when draft is shit, sometimes experimenting is a waste of time. Sometimes draft might be like this. It might be worth all the fucking gold in the world to have crazy picks and angles people don't get.
It's definitely an underrated part of just League of Legends as a whole. And part of the reason that I watch so much LPL is because when you watch these teams, they are they're very strict on what they play, and they don't try to be jacks of all trades. They have their styles, and you get to watch teams that are very practiced at their own styles just compete against other teams that are great at the things that they're great at. So you have this really good dynamic between teams that are really good at both of the things that they're doing. Whereas I feel like in the West, everyone just like tries to become super like good at everything. Like somehow they can play like side lane, they can also play mid, but then at the end of the day, they're just not great at any of them. And that's not what you're going to need to build a championship team. So when you think about teams like RNG, for example, last year at Worlds, and people were flaming them, oh man, why are they picking like all this fucking Annie? Like if Galio and TF are banned, why do they go to Annie and all these shit champions? Like why are they not just playing something that is a better pick that they are worse at? In reality, it seems like in League of Legends, the teams that end up doing the best are teams that have a very general playstyle. If you think about world champions, right? You think about the teams that have hit the absolute peak. Just think about the last 4 that we've had. We had EDG that was bot lane focused the entire season. They were just a bot lane focused team. You have in 2020 Domwan, which was the jungle Canyon carry meta where he was playing Nidalee and Graves, and he was just the best in the world at that. They played similarly every single game. 2019 FPX, what were they known for? Nautilus mid, things like that, just roaming and diving side lanes with jungle and mid and support even. Then you have 2018, which is the Shy, right? Like that was when he was the fucking godlike top. He was probably the highest peak of a top laner that we've ever seen, and he was the all-star carry of the team. Like these teams are not randomly in big matches starting to play through bot side, for example. It's not like you're like, oh, Dom1, maybe Ghost is not going to play like Jin or Ashe or one of these picks these game, and he's going to go play something really hard carry. They're going to just play through like a Jinx or an Aphelios, and Ghost is going to carry the game. Every now and then they did that. I'm not saying that it never happened ever.
Of course,
But generally, they know what they're going to do. And if they do branch out and they play one of those other styles, it's going to be almost an ideal situation for that style because of the way that the draft turned out, where they're like, all right, even if we're not the best Aphelios team in the world, if you are giving us a free Aphelios angle and you're like calling our bluff here, we're going to just take it. We're going to actually just go and pick the thing that you're thinking that we just won't do.
You think that the Western teams are more likely to do like essentially what they think are just strong drafts, etc., but like for the wrong team setup in this sense?
I mean, I just think that they try to like, even the way that the narratives go in the West, you know, I can tell because I do a lot of LPL streams. When people pick a champion, they're like, what the fuck? Why would they pick this champion here? This champion sucks here. It's like, yeah, but like that's that guy's champion. Like that's what that guy does. Like you have to beat him at his best. He's going to be better. He's going to be good enough at that that he's going to compensate for a lot of the matchup difference. Like League of Legends is a game where
people is basically Armuts picking Wukongs when it makes sense though, but not for anyone else.
Yeah, essentially.
You know, like he can win on it. He can win on it. Yeah, but only him. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I like seeing that type of stuff, and I feel like these teams are trying to spread themselves way too thin in terms of like play styles. Like just commit to who you are. Like you're gonna have an identity that's naturally gonna come that's gonna come around because of what you scrim with. Like you're gonna play the games. You're gonna know in the games who the fuck is good on your team, what your teammates' strengths are, and try to like funnel everything through that. It doesn't have to be so extreme. Like I think that LPL teams are way too extreme when it comes to that. You know, like they'll just counterpick themselves on purpose because they're like, no, you cannot leave this champion up versus us. Like that is like a little bit fucking crazy. Like they're a little bit psychotic in that sense. But I just think that in general, these like I've seen this pattern so many times where a team will get good at one style and then they'll completely drop it, start playing something else, and they'll be like, yeah, we got that style in the bag. Eventually, when you play against better and better teams, somebody's going to challenge you and you're going to have to relearn it. I mean, it's the same way if you just play solo queue. If you're just a random player and you play solo queue and you play you know, your meta champions, you play like your Karthus, whatever, and then you switch and you're like, okay, today I'm just gonna work on something else. If you play 3-4 days of champions that you don't normally play, and then you go back to the stuff you're comfortable on and you play at your same elo, like what naturally is a competitive elo for you, you will notice a fall off in your gameplay. Like if you're truly at like an elo where you're playing against people that are almost as good as you, or they are as good as you or better, you're gonna notice a very big drop off from where you're playing in just 3 to 4 days. And the same thing happens with teams.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.